Okay, I'd like to thank you for being here with our artist, the friend. Every 2 years we do a biennial. We select artists from the area, and we try to bring different approaches, different personalities. Unfortunately, the only artist that is not with us here today is Anzi, the person on the right. Anzi Emmons received a BFA with concentration in painting and printmaking from Ohio Wesleyan University and an MFA in print from the University of Iowa. He has lived in Brooklyn, Vermont, and Iowa City. His art have been exhibited as a solo, group exhibition, national and international. As a matter of fact, he got, I believe, a show in Philadelphia tonight, right? That is what he couldn't be here. Emmons teaches at Muhlenberg College and resides between Allentown and Philadelphia. Too bad not to have him here, but there is his work. But we have with us the artist on my left, that is Rigo Peralta. And Rigo Peralta was born in Dominican Republic and emigrated to the New York City in 1989. He studied at the Escuela Nacional de Bellas Artes, Santiago, República Dominicana, and at the Art Studio League in New York with Jack Faragasso. The social and cultural changes have resulted in a multicultural mix of his Caribbean past and urban present. He has developed a visual code that marks and transcends moments in Dominican visual art. Peralta maintains a studio in the Banana Factory, art center in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and have been in the Lehigh Valley now for a while. Yeah. Okay, what the format that we like to do, if you don't mind, is to create a conversation. I would like if anybody have a question, and that way we can start, you know, our conversation. Anybody who got the first question for Rigo, and that way Rigo will start, you know, talking about his work. That is how I would like to conduct the gallery talk. Therefore, volunteer for questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I know that most of your work is painting, and these images are photographs of angels from cemeteries. I was wondering if this imagery, do you use this imagery for help in your painting, for studies for your painting?
Well, like many years ago, I would say about 10 years ago, I did a show of angels, and I've been working with angels ever since. But I use photography as a tool, and I see it as a tool to create my work. But 5 years ago, I started an investigation about different cemeteries in New York, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and other countries that I have visited in the past. And I started being amazed by these angels, because there is a lot of story to tell by the way they've been going through the time, losing their face, losing their hands. And beside that, I think a lot of people is afraid to go to the cemetery. And I found a lot of peace in the cemeteries, and I have identified myself with all these angels. That's why I'm working with this investigation, and it's a way to document this beautiful work through photography and go through different countries to bring them to the viewers of these people that maybe doesn't have the time to see it, or go to the cemetery because they're afraid of maybe have some issue with that.
Yeah, Karina?
I was wondering why you chose to make them all blue.
Yeah, the cyanotype, I I showed Mr. Ricardo the work, and it happened to be there was one in cyanotype. So Ricardo said, "Oh, I like the way that I can get so much values in the blue," and that's why I decided to do in cyanotype, in digital cyanotype. Is originally back in the time they used to use cyanotype to create photographs. So through the time we have now the digital dark room that will facilitate us to bring different approach to photography on these days. That's why I chose to do cyanotype, and Ricardo recommended.
Well, because basically what we were talking about, the conversation, he got a lot of, and this work was very inspirational for him because, as he said before, he used it for painting, and he based a lot of his work, and that is an interesting thing how he approached this, you know, by using photograph in many different kind of his, even his still work and all that, you know, he do that. But when he showed me the photograph, one of the things that I found is that they were very uneven, and then we talked about it, and we went through a lot of different conversations. And uneven, they were great, but uneven in the way that they were really very different from each other. And to put them in an exhibition, you know, didn't have that kind of punch. And then we talk about it, and we look at different kind of possibilities, you know, of looking at. And as you very well know today, in Photoshop you can do almost anything. You know, and the cyanotype, you can go, you know, you can even go very close to the old-fashioned side. You know, I mean, it's a lot of different kind of ways. And he was able to really create that kind of feeling, and that is the reason why, you know, why is that.
Now, on my photograph, I tried to, I don't know if it's by, you know, consensus that what I'm doing when I take in the photos, but I can see that when I do the photos, I keep the same code that I work on my paintings by taking the photos. So that was something that amazed Ricardo too when he saw my photographs. It's a way, I mean, I think it's a code that you have in your eye. And once you put it through the lens, you'll be able to get this kind of effect. That if you see one of my photos, and you go and see one of my paintings, you're gonna get the relation between the two things.
Any other question for Rigo? Okay, it's too bad that we don't have ANSI results, but I already mentioned, those of you who just arrived, we talked very briefly about who is ANSI, and he is a professor at Muhlenberg College. Now we're going to move to the other area. Anybody, any other questions? Anything else that you want to say, Rigo?
No, I think I say everything. Thank you for coming to the show. That's more important.
Okay. From Indiana University, and a BA in Spanish Literature from Oberlin College, Ohio. She has been the recipient of several fellowships, grants, and awards, and have exhibited in numerous solos and group shows nationally and internationally. She teaches at Lafayette College and resides between New York City and Easton. Okay, we go to follow the same kind of format that we start down there. Who would like to start asking Karina a question? And from there we go to, as we did with Rigo, we pick up. Go ahead.
Where do you get your inspiration?
Where do I get my inspiration? That's a great question. A lot of my work is research-based, so I often get my inspiration from things that I learn about and then respond to. So in this particular case, I learned, you know, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I learned that about 27 lynchings happened in Maryland in the late 19th century and early 20th century. And that sparked my curiosity because many of the places where they happened was pretty close to where I grew up and also close to where I summered with my family. So I started doing some research, and a lot of my work connects to some, I would say, memory and also history. So I started digging a little bit and decided that I wanted to photograph these places, these sites.
Karina, could you talk a little bit about the relationship between verbal information and visual information in the photographs, and then maybe also how you make the visual decisions that you make?
Another really good question. So, you know, photography, all art, visual art is a different language, right, than the language that we use to speak with, which is a more literal language represented by words. So when this is a theme that kind of comes up a lot in my work, and I'm really interested in the history of photography and the history of art, and in examining and investigating how images, how they communicate certain ideas. So in thinking about this work, I did a lot of research. In making this work, I should say, not thinking about it. In making the work, I had to do a lot of research because the places that you're looking at are as close as I could possibly get to actual sites where these lynchings occurred. So there was a lot of research and cross-referencing, a lot of text, really, that I had to read to figure out, you know, to get as close as possible. In some cases, right on the mark, and in others, very close approximations, I would say. So the text, that kind of, I guess, research goes into making the photographs, and then the decision comes into how much I tell the viewer. So the way that I've sort of settled on, and in a previous exhibition, I actually had quotes from the research, and then decided that it was too much information, that I wanted the images to communicate with the viewer in a more metaphoric and ambiguous way, because that's what images do. So I've left it as just the titles, the name of the person, and the place where they were lynched, and the date of when it happened. So that's kind of how I made those decisions. Is there a second part of the question?
And then knowing that there's that kind of dialogue between the verbal and the visual, how do you then think about the composition of the photographs?
So, composition of the photographs. That's the hard one, because a lot of that's intuitive. Okay, so it's about, you know, going to the place, and my process, I use a 4x5 camera, so maybe the process is what really kind of answers that question. And a 4x5 camera, it's a field camera, which means it's very light, but I definitely can't carry it and photograph at the same time. So it's on a tripod, and I use Polaroid film, which is, you know, they've stopped making. But so I proof a lot, and I play with the angles, and a lot of it will be looking at light. So the times that I photographed tend to be where there's that kind of magic hour light in the morning, early morning, or in the late afternoon. So I certainly use all those kinds of skills of photography that, you know, I know about. I practice those. And, you know, it's in some cases I reshot, this particular one I went back and reshot because I wasn't happy with it. So, you know, how I get the compositions, I guess everything has to kind of align, and there's that decision-making process. I should also say that it's a long process, that it's not instant, and that I'll go back to my studio and kind of look things over and you know, think about them. But the project, I guess, started in 2006, and it wasn't, I didn't get to this point until 2008. So, and that's, you know, not even that long really, but in what a project can take for me. So.
Are you doing a lot of cropping after you photograph?
Not that much, but a little bit, yes. Definitely, I'm not against cropping at all. I definitely do some cropping, and I definitely do sometimes a little Photoshop manipulation. So, for example, I'll confess that that first photograph was actually 2 different negatives that I put together. And you'll notice that everything has a 4:5 proportion, but that one doesn't. And I actually shot it thinking that it would be longer because I wanted to elongate the bridge. So I did take 2 images and then stitch them together in Photoshop. So I'm definitely not, I don't have any rules about cropping and things like that. But I do try to get as close and try to get it as close as possible when I do it, and I try to think it out, pre-visualize it in some way.
You take a picture, trying to see, take a picture on how you see the history of the area, or how you want the viewer to see it?
It's always going to come through me, so there's always going to be that subjectivity of how I'm interpreting the information. But I think when you look at the style, they're pretty straightforward. So I'm definitely referencing a very kind of direct, kind of documentary practice.
Any other question for Carolina?
So the intention of the photographs is to give us a sense of the place filtered through what you researched happened there. Right? So that the issue is of the lynchings, and then the articles about the lynchings, and I can't remember what the third one. Well, the Mason-Dixon one.
Right. And you're just seeing one part of it.
Okay. And what part of the actual?
These are the lynching sites.
These are all the lynching sites. So I guess and you're doing it as a sort of documenting it. And what, I'm not sure how I want to frame this, but what is it that you're, sometimes it's a broad space, sometimes it's a small space. You're not exactly positive that a lynching happened from that tree, right? Or you are?
Pretty close.
Okay.
Pretty close, yeah.
So I guess my question is, what are you expecting us to take away from this? It's, the history is really intriguing, and the way you go about it, and the photographs are gorgeous, but I'm wondering, is it a little bit too, some of them are, the site is sort of desolate, et cetera, but is it a little bit sort of romanticizing or glamorizing what happened, or you think it's?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of things. So, one intention I have, I think photographs, and what I started out saying is visual imagery is ambiguous inherently. Mm-hmm. That it's not, you can't be as specific. And I certainly don't want to hit anyone over the head. But there are a couple things that do inform the work. So one thought that I had that was very bothersome to me is, I'll just use this one as an example. This is the courthouse in Princess Anne. And there's no, the lynching actually happened, this lynching was photographed because it happened in 1931. And it actually happened, it's either this tree or this tree, okay? And there's an actual photo documentation of that. Well, you go to the courthouse and there's no signage, there's nothing that tells us that happened. So in some way, I'm kind of memorializing these places. So that's one intention. And then the other one is, I don't know if you are familiar with the exhibition called Without Sanctuary. Well, Without Sanctuary was an exhibition of lynching postcards, okay? And it was an exhibition that first came out in New York that I saw in this tiny gallery with no text, no context, and there was lines out the door. And people were going to view these postcards. It was just so, it was like people had these things, but two people ended up collecting them and then exhibiting them. And they were shocking. And they weren't just romanticizing, but it was almost like re-objectifying. So I really wasn't interested in, I wanted to do something about it, but I wasn't interested in that tack. I didn't want to show the victims again. I wanted us as viewers to think about place as having part of a memory, and specifically an American memory. That's part of our American history. And that's kind of how I started thinking about it and becoming more or less obsessed with the project.
Yeah, memory have become a big, big thing in photography.
Yeah.
Of course, you can interpret many different ways, but the way that you put it, memory is becoming an anthropological, memory is becoming an archaeological, it's a lot of things that you can do with memory. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this idea of like these places that we go to and we don't think about, perhaps what happened.
So out of these pictures, I'm trying to get like the viewer to think like you should be aware of your surroundings, like anything could happen or has happened.
Yeah, and then this specific history. Yeah, both things. Yeah, thinking about place in this way, and then also thinking about these specific places.
It's like when you go to the Coliseum, and do you think about the lions and the people that were killed down there, or you are just looking at the architecture, or the historical part? That is what happened. And when you go to museums or historical places and you see the dent on the stair, how many millions of people, important people, not important, have been gone through it,
And there's that other idea that when we learn about American history, it's really very positive. We don't learn that much about the sort of negative things that happen. And I think, we should know about both.
It's sanitized.
Yeah, it's sanitized, and it's, I don't know why we can't kind of live with it in a more public way or in a more communal way, I guess.
Okay, this is really good. Any other question for Karina, or should we move to our next, last but not least? College, New Jersey, and studying art with Hugo Lust, and I cannot pronounce it.
Walking stick.
Walking stick.
Yeah.
She is exhibiting at the Siegel Gallery, Montclair State University, New Jersey, and she is an artist in residence at Lafayette College. She's printing her large format photography at the Specialized Media Lab, Elton Harmon Montaigne Studio in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Question, we could continue the same format. We'll have the first question for Winnie.
Where were these photos taken, Winnie?
They were taken actually at the New Jersey shore, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. These, at first people think these are wheat, but they're actually not. They're kind of a hybrid grass that grows down there at the beach. They're actually shot, most of them are shot where I'm on the beach itself and looking up into a dune.
How come everything's right to left?
I don't know. That was my inspiration today, probably because of the light. That's one of my major inspirations is light. I can go out with my camera and say I'm going to go take a bunch of new photographs today. And for some reason I could if I'm walking along wherever I am on the street, going through the cemeteries, going through the little city of Bethlehem and people's backyards and things like that. If the light's not right, if it hasn't inspired me, if it doesn't click in my head, it just doesn't happen. And it's amazing how that photograph will not come across with the same vitality and the same energy.
do you take these photos like almost like document your life, or where you've been, or is it more just like for the sake of photography?
Huh. Yeah, I do actually take them as a document of where I've been. I usually take my camera everywhere that I go. I always did. It was something that I had from the time I was a kid. I would love to just have it there and know, because I moved around a lot. Our family moved a great deal to a number of different places. I went to a number of different schools. So I guess it did. I guess it took the place of, it helped to ensure that I was actually there at that location for a certain amount of time, and as a documentary piece. And just as we were just up in Vermont for a week, and I documented this whole sugaring process, but I documented it in a way that, I hope will come across as more of a romantic and, more ethereal experience, not just, the industrial or the pre-industrial, sugaring process. But I do that. I take it as a document of where I've been, so that I know that I was actually there and I can appreciate where I was.
Could you say a little more about the sentence that you have in your statement that's like looking into the bright sunlight and then viewing the world?
Yes. I don't know how many people actually have done this, but I imagine almost everybody has. But when you close your eyes, like if you go out into a really beautiful, bright environment, if you were to go outside today, close your eyes and then open them, you would get this like instant photograph, and everything may not be precisely sharp. It may not have, the colors would be more pronounced, more exaggerated. The line, the objects would be a little bit more abstracted, which is what I try to do in my photographs. I try and bring to light that I want you to be responding to it as something that is somewhat familiar, but at the same time, I want to toggle between the abstraction of the line and the texture and the color, as well as the reality of it and where it is and where it was taken. So it's a very thin line to walk, and I keep walking that line and trying to press it further. I think my second piece here from the right is something that really captures it the best for me. I've done exactly what I wanted to do, in that you see the lines as abstracted forms, but you also see the depth of being there. And if you were to look at that on that sunny day, close your eyes, open them up, and then get this immediate response, you may actually see that. So it's very instantaneous. It's faster than a photograph, actually, what's going on in my head. And, I always said that, I hope my daughter grows up to invent some kind of a chip, which may sound kind of odd, but I would really love it, because there's instances whenever I'm anywhere where I want to take a photograph and I may not have my camera with me, and I wish that I had just a chip that I could have in my brain to capture that really millisecond instant of time, and be able to translate it into something that would be a creative force.
The response you want the person who's looking at the photograph to get, is it like a response, from the light, is it one that you want a person to almost feel like optimism or vitality?
Yes, I do. I also want you to be a bit almost humbled, which is why I am so happy to be able to have the opportunity at Lafayette College, working with Lou Minter, to be able to print on this giant format printer, which is 44 inches wide. I want you to be somewhat humbled by it and honor nature, and realize that you walk by these things every day, and you may not appreciate just some grass that's underneath you, but if you were close to the ground, and you felt small and insignificant compared to it, you might think it was this beautiful, beautiful, magical kingdom, so to speak, and be very honorable and not want it to go away. You would want to preserve it and make sure that it's there for not only yourself, but everyone after you. So I want them to be optimistic, yeah. I have an optimistic attitude most of the time.
Whitney,
Yes.
you talked about the instantaneous moment of perception, but I also have the sense that these photographs are also highly manipulated through digital processes and the process of making them its size. Can you talk a little bit about the time between the instantaneous moment and the work that you do
Sure.
developing the image?
Essentially what I do is when I take the photograph, I see the contrast of it, and I see the light, I see the patterning. I'm very excited about patterning and abstracted line, but when I bring it back into Photoshop, the three things I specifically do is I pump up the contrast, I bring up the saturation tremendously, and I may toggle back and forth with the hue a little bit. But essentially, these colors are there. They are resident in the photograph. I don't go in and actually paint over it or capture the background or add color. I can just intensify it for the purpose of trying to make it more abstracted, and that, maybe it's because my eyes are going bad. I mean, when I see these things, they're not as clear, and they're not as they're fuzzy and abstracted shapes. But I don't really do a tremendous amount of manipulation as far as the color is concerned, other than the hue, the saturation, and the contrast.
What about focus and texture?
Well, on the texture, right, I do have, on some of these, I do have some filtering, dry brush filtering, and that again is to bring up the patterning. I mean, essentially, you would be able to see this patterning if you got very, very, very close to, looking at it, and maybe looking at it under a microscope, or you would be able to see the beautiful patterning on it. But by taking that and putting a dry brush technique on it, all it does is just clarifies that patterning and abstracts it a little bit, so that it's a little bit more painterly, and again, lends itself to the abstraction versus the reality.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Are these first-time shots, or did you go over the same place?
Nope, these are first-time shots. I forced my husband to bring me down to the shore that day. I said, we haven't been to the shore all summer. Could we please go down to the shore? It's a beautiful, bright, sunny day. It's going to be gorgeous down there. And I was fortunate enough that, like I said, these are about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock maybe, but the light was perfect, and the sky was a beautiful blue sky. As you can see, no clouds in it. And it just, everything happened to work. But I think it's because when I go into a scene, again, if the light is present, I can basically take any photograph. In my head, I see it. When I see the image and it translates into the photographic final image, I know that it's going to work or it's not going to work. So I'm fortunate that I don't waste too much time. I can tell based on my experience of doing the photographs, that it's going to be what I want if I do, if I bring up the contrast a little bit and make it pop.
Great. Thank you very much. Don't forget that the exhibit will be here till May 1st. Bring your friends, come and see it. Enjoy the refreshment. We got some refreshment.